Play, Watch, Listen is a mostly games industry podcast featuring mostly game developers, and it is funded entirely by supporters on Patreon.
Been a while since we did this podcast, everybody. I was on a little hiatus. Coming back right hot into, you're going to put you both on the spot. Elden Ring's nominated for Game of the Year, even though it's a DLC.
Oh, God.
Explain.
It's an interesting...
Have we been gone enough that we were doing Game Awards discourse last time? Like, I feel like we've gone from one Games Awards discourse into another.
We do it every
I feel like
year,
we're annually doing it.
I was thinking about it when I was like, well, obviously we're talking about the Game of the Year nominees. And I think every year I ask you guys what your Game of the Year is, and every year we don't. We're kind of like, I don't know. Like, we're really bad at answering the question. But yes, the Shadow of the Erdtree is nominated for...
I mean, in their defense, isn't it? It's like Angela's been playing it, and she's been on it for weeks. It's a
like
huge
a substantial.
DLC.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where it's kind of like, I remember when Miles Morales. Obviously, that wasn't a DLC, but it wasn't. It was kind of initially, and it's possible I was confused, but I thought it was initially framed as like, this is sort of an in-betweener. It's not a full sequel the way that like, Spider-Man 2 will
like
be.
Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. It's like a smaller spin-off.
Right. Or what was the Burial at Sea from BioShock, where you're like, this is not a full game.
Was that not packaged as DLC? Burial at Sea? I think
maybe it was.
I think that one was, yeah. But it was like substantial.
You're right. It was substantial.
Like
when I look at a DLC that's... Sorry, go on.
Well, when I look at a DLC that's 4 or 5 hours long or more, and in the case of Elden Ring, it's way more than that. And I think, I've scored whole games that are shorter than that. It doesn't feel like it should invalidate. Not that length is what matters. I'm kind of the mind that sequels in general we should be dubious of for a Game of the Year, just by almost like on eligibility grounds, unless they've completely altered the formula and it's a sequel in name only. Like you think of Tears of the Kingdom relative to Breath of the Wild. I feel like that. It's not even really a sequel.
But you strongly agreed that God of War Ragnarok deserved the Game of the Year nomination, obviously.
I have never diminished God of War Ragnarok ever.
I never actually finished Ragnarok because...
Well, I haven't finished Journey or Abzu or Assassin's Creed Syndicate, you piece of shit.
That's true. I do judge my relationships.
I played Astrobot God of War. Does that count? Is that good enough?
What a game, man!
It's so good. It's so good. I loved it. That might be my Game of the Year. You said this last time we spoke, and I went in with an open mind, and you're absolutely right. It's
so charming.
Sorry, let me backtrack though. So Shadow of the Erdtree is 25 and a half hours. It's people are contesting it because it's DLC, but it's kind of confusing. Look, my main takeaway is if that's what the jury nominated because they thought it was Game of the Year, then that's what they nominated. Okay, I don't give a shit. But if I were to make an award show, I would probably make a separate category for DLC. But it's also, if that's a thing that people played for 25 hours, should it not be awarded? If it's as good as many of the games that came out, if it stood out as one of the best gaming experiences of the year, I feel like you can make a case in either direction. And I feel pretty strongly that
all awards are nonsense, so it's fine.
Exactly. At the end of the day, correct. But like, should we not be rewarding a DLC that's that sizable, where they could have repackaged it as an Elden Ring 2 if they really wanted to, but instead they came out with something that's that good and that high quality and actually like does improve on the base game in a bunch of ways. People loved it. It was one of the biggest gaming events of the year. Why not give it an award? And at the end of the day, all awards are nonsense.
It is such a fascinating game specific conundrum.
Yeah.
We do have there is a bit of a music proxy to this as well. Like, if you write score for a DLC and you release a soundtrack album that contains only the music of that DLC, is that eligible alongside others that are not? It is a similar question.
See, if in that case, I feel like I would say absolutely yes, where I feel like I'm in the camp of, if it's DLC, just make a DLC and expansions category. But if it's music,
but that's where we go. Usually it's best music or best original score.
I don't see why that it's not like DLC, because the music isn't fundamentally different for a DLC versus a base game.
Meaning the process of scoring it and all that. I mean, more than often, more often than not, I think the kind of powers that be come down on the side that you're on. I operate under the similar principle where I go, how I might vote is different than what I think ought to be allowed.
Sure.
For example, like I thought White Lotus was a masterpiece, top to bottom, and the score, understandably and rightfully, got a ton of love, including Emmy nomination and win. And then season 2 came out, and it similarly basically swept the music awards. And I thought, I don't know that it should be ineligible, but I would never vote for a season 2 of a thing that's especially when season 1 got so much love, where I just go, they didn't change it. It's not like it was a whole cloth reimagining of the entire formula. So it feels a little funny to go, here's the same. But then again, I remember like Bryan Cranston winning the Emmy like 5 years in a row for Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, well, like last week tonight, like John Oliver, hasn't he won like the Grammy
or the Daily Show
like 10 times?
Daily Show won the Emmy like 50 times in a row.
I wouldn't argue with your choice there, Austin, in that I don't think I agree with you. Like in that I would not vote that way. I think I'm okay with a sequel, but like that's part of it is you could make whatever fucking criteria you want. It's like the conversation that we used to have at IGN.
Sure.
I'm sure I would have spoken about this before. Is when we were trying to do any ranked lists of like the best game of all time or the best games in this franchise of all time. It's so tough when you try to set a criteria that everybody agrees with, and it's frankly easier to do if you just have personal criteria, because how do you nominate Portal or Portal 2? Like,
right.
You could make a case for Portal 2 being only exists because of Portal 1, and is Portal 2 a better game? Maybe. Like, I think that probably the 2 best games ever made, but, like, which one do you pick? And you can go, well, that couldn't exist without this one. It has to be Final Fantasy VI if you want to do Final Fantasy VII. Like, it's just, you get so in the weeds that it's kind of worth throwing the whole thing out and just vote whatever you think is right. So if you don't want to vote for a sequel, totally fine. Like,
that exactly. And that's where I guess I take it a little bit case by case.
Yeah.
It's just one of those where it's if the main value of awards is not so much artistic validation, because I don't think anything really should, other than players, should really be able to offer that.
Well,
it's nice when your colleagues, they obviously on an emotional level, it's nice when your colleagues kind of vouch for you, but it doesn't make the music actually better or worse. It just means that that's what your colleagues like.
It's a great point. Yeah, you're right.
And
it doesn't even mean it's inherently good. It just means the people who voted for it like it.
Yeah, and that's obviously typically a lot of these awards, unless you're talking about online, voted on by a kind of mass public or whatever, or audience awards kind of things. Like the Grammys, the Gang Awards, the DICE Awards. These are, BAFTAs. These are largely curated juries of professionals who tend to be pretty far along in their career, which means that their criteria is very different from a random player that doesn't care about anything other than how did it make me feel, was it good when I tried it. So that's where it's, to me, like Steam reviews are generally more valuable to me than like media reviews, because even though it might be insightful, a great review might be really insightful and interesting because they're theoretically, in theory, I might be being charitable, that kind of coming at it with a deeper knowledge of the subject material that a user wouldn't. There's just something about the gut reaction of someone that knows no allegiance, who's like, I love this. It speaks to me. All that said,
I don't know about that. Like, so I do think you're being a little bit charitable in that as somebody who reviewed games, I just played a lot of them. It's not like I had more in-depth.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the fullest extent of my opinion, I tend to be with Troy on this one, that looks at critics the way like they're treated in Ratatouille, as a sort of like scourge on the art. Someone who's there. I don't know about
that, but I the only thing that I think makes the review from a games journalist any more important than anyone else is that in theory they have more time to be playing games and they're doing it for a lot longer, so they have played more games by default, and that does change the way you review things. I got so much shit for a video about 7 out of 10 game reviews this year where I spoke about this exact thing. My issue with a lot of user reviews is I feel like they're either 10 or 0, and that's not
Yeah.
inherently valuable to me. Like the way that I consume reviews
sure.
is always through friends. I will talk to the two of you well before I read a Steam review, because it goes, the woman's tits too small, 0 out of 10, or it goes, best game I've ever played, and it's just so extreme in either direction that I don't.
Whereas
find a lot
I
of
say
value
the
in it.
women's tits too small, art, 7 out of 10. That's the nuance you get from
And that's
me.
what I want from my reviews.
I think there's two things to factor there. Obviously, if it's a game that has entered into the zeitgeist of controversy somehow, then all
True.
this flies out the window,
True.
because now it's some combo of review bombing and or
Review
like
inflating.
we got to stand up for this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And both of those are silly. I care only about people that just played it in earnest and are hopefully blissfully unaware of any of that stuff. And the more a game becomes known for its controversial aspects, the more that obviously, it makes those reviews. But this is why I like Steam, because Steam is just thumbs up or not. And people tend to leave comments, and obviously it's still entirely possible to review bomb a game, and it happens all the time. But I find that some people really take a lot of time to write something. They'll be like, I'm giving this a thumbs up, but I had a lot of issues. But I still overall like it enough that, and like you see people really trying to put something meaningful there.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome, because they got nothing to prove to anybody. They're not that, and you see a lot of charitable intent of like someone who goes, look, I want this game to succeed because I think these devs seem like great folks, but I do think this game has a lot of work cut out for itself still, and like, I don't know.
Recently a post about some of the early access reviews for Baldur's Gate 3 that were user reviews that listed like, hey, this is incredible and I'm so excited. Here are a bunch of things that need to be fixed, and all of them had been. It was a post of maybe 7 screenshots, and every single thing everyone complained about for actual release of the game had been completely fixed, which is awesome. Such a
that comes as zero surprise, I must say.
True.
Larian is just like the dev to which all other devs aspire to be like.
100%.
I mean, it's just they seemingly do everything right.
Yeah.
They're just so awesome. But,
yeah, they're up for the Community Award at the Game Awards.
Who's in the cursed category of gaming personality this year? Who's about to be outed as a horrible monster?
Is Queso. I don't know who any of the others are, but it always goes that way. Also, I was nominated for that one year in 2020. And
but did you win?
No. Is it only people who win?
Then you avoided the curse.
Oh.
Yeah, have a look. Go and have a look at the history of people who've won that award.
Wow. I mean, Valkyrie won the year that I was nominated, but I do think that maybe she came out with a line of skincare protection that was specifically for blue light, and she did sort of get semi-cancelled for that, which may have even been the same year. So for Game of the Year,
up for you.
We have Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor Refantasio. Have either of you played Balatro?
I love that game.
Oh my god.
I'm refusing to let myself until Tron Catalyst ships. Oh, I announced a game since we last spoke. That's something that happened.
Announced a game since we last spoke. That's crazy.
Yes. So that's I'm not allowed to play it. I'm not allowed to play it until it's
extremely addictive. Yeah, it's it'll ruin your life. It's so good though. Very good.
It's one of those great. It feels like somebody going, I find poker boring, so how do I switch it up in a way? There've been some interesting, I remember at the GDC experimental gameplay workshop a number of years ago when someone showed their pitch for speed chess, because they were like, I don't like chess, but I think that the mechanics of the chess pieces are cool. So what if we made a 24-person multiplayer match where each person just controls one piece and move with sovereignty? And it was literally like he strung all these Xboxes together, and it became each individual chess match was maybe 5 seconds, because everyone just flooded to the center, and then somehow the king got taken. And you never even really saw what happened, and it was hilarious. But it was just someone going, the bones of this are good. Balatro is that same way where you go, I used to play a lot of poker in college. I hadn't played in years, but I actually like the game of poker as a sort of as like a psyop game. But But the way that Balatro fucks with the formula it's like a poker roguelike. I think it's awesome.
Totally, me too. Yeah.
Perfect Steam Deck game. It's like a go-to airplane game.
It is a very, very good idea. The whole lineup here, again, I think like I voted for Astrobot, but it's not like I'm comfortable even with that decision. I just think like it's so goddamn pleasant. Like, the game's just so unbelievable.
It's a warm cup of cocoa of the game, isn't it? It's just very rewarding.
Yeah.
Sony's first Nintendo game. It's
and that's the thing.
Yeah,
it feels
so good.
It's got that Nintendo polish as well. Like, and I think that's often missed by the clones, right? It's really ridiculously clean and well polished. It's incredible. And it's very impressive. It's very inspiring.
Totally, yeah. It's interesting that this year the Game of the Year and the Best Game Direction are the exact same 6 games.
Oh wow, interesting.
And it makes me think.
I never understood how you could split those two categories because I've never understood how you can split the concept of the director and the game in terms of popular understanding of whether a game's good. I've never understood that one. I get it more in film, I think.
Well,
it's easier to split the jobs up.
I get
from a
that.
punter point of view.
Well, game direction, I'm sure we haven't a whole episode about this, I think, but to me, game direction is when you can clearly see that every single piece, every single discipline was pointing towards the same direction. You know what I mean? Like, game direction is when every pillar, every core of the game is pointing very clearly towards whatever the outcome was. So like for that one, I voted for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for best direction. And it is tough because these games are all very good. They are all very good games.
Does that mean at the Oscars you would also argue Best Director and Best Picture, in theory, should be the same?
I think the manner in which movies are made versus the manner in which games are made. And I say this as a game director. I find it hard to quantify what other game directors are responsible for in their games in a way that I feel like, because film jobs, well, the active creative participants in a movie are such a smaller list of people and such a smaller team of people in terms of, obviously everyone's contributing, there's hundreds of people contributing, but in terms of deciding a decision, that's a very small pool of people in film, whereas I feel games are a bit more, because they are larger products from just a complexity point of view. I love Remedy games. I love Sam Lake. I can't tell where Sam Lake ends and Sam Lake's team starts.
That's a good
that's
point.
A very.
It's like you don't
that's
really
where I
know what
that's
the
very
director
interesting.
is responsible for.
You've been one of the more vocally critical of the auteur mythos.
That's what I'm saying. Well, that's what I'm saying is I can't. In film, I can subscribe to the auteur. I understand it's a shorthand, but I can still understand. I can look at a movie and I can go, okay, I think I know what jobs Tarantino probably did on this.
I see. I think
I know which jobs.
Backward, what you were phrasing. I realized
on film, I feel, and I'm probably wrong, right? I'm probably ignorant. I'm sure there's 20 people I'm forgetting and not thinking about because I don't know how films are made. I don't work in film, but in games, I know what I'm responsible for in the games I've directed, but I would struggle to do that with anyone else's stuff. I do like your definition, by the way, because that's also, I can't remember if the Game Awards, do they reward game director or game direction? Because your argument's really strong for, so your argument's really strong for that. That works as a concept. And you could argue that game direction is not the sole responsibility of a game director, which is a whole other interesting layer. So yeah, I get it, but I also just... Yeah, I think one thing the games
could even be different things among different studios. Like they could do
it 100% is. Yeah. It's 100% very different.
I feel it's a really interesting question. And as I sit here trying to work out, what my sort of answer to that would be of why I might vote for a game direction for one, but not necessarily game of the year, is like, I could imagine if, for example, Baldur's Gate 3 and Inside had come out the same year. Inside would be a pretty unquestionable direction one for me. And even though I really would, to me, it's not just game of the year, it's like game of all time. But in terms of sheer joy brought to me, Baldur's Gate 3 will have brought more joy to me than Inside if they had come out in the same year, because it's not just a function of the fact that I played one like 8 times more hours. It's like you end up talking about, every time Darren Korb and I get on the phone, it's, oh my God, when you got to this, what was your party like? What sort of, you just go down these nerdy rabbit holes. To me, that's the kind of stuff that starts to add up to what is your game of the year, because it's sort of the ecosystem around just the experience of playing it. Whereas I feel like Direction, I'm trying to just say, how was this made? Because it's like, I remember when I was in college, there was a music history professor who was still this day the greatest professor I ever had, the greatest teacher I had in my whole life. And he knew everything about the classical music tradition. I mean, every composer, everything. And someone asked him once, who's your favorite composer? Because, it's like, this is theoretically the most informed
Austin
opinion. Yeah, one of his students. That would have not raised eyebrows at all. He said, my favorite composer of all time is Edward Elgar, who everyone in Western society knows as the composer of the Enigma variations that they play at graduation ceremonies. The ba ba da bum ba ba. That I was like, Edward Elgar would not say Elgar was his favorite composer of all time. That's such a, like, he wrote some very nice tunes, sort of mid-tier British composer from the early 20th century. And I was like, how on earth do you choose Elgar? And he goes, I spend a lot of time appreciating fine dining and great wine, but sometimes I really just want a fucking cheeseburger. And so it's like how you can have direction and discernment siphon away from just like, what's the thing that just brings me joy when I sort of step away from all that. I think there's an interesting potential delineation there between
I think
game of the year
second
versus
that you
direction.
said Inside and Baldur's Gate 3, I knew which one would go in which category, because same cases for Inside in terms of direction. That game is expert level of all disciplines clearly working together on one vision.
Yeah.
It does.
I like your definition.
I mean, it's how
I like
I
your
justify it, but
definition.
really you can vote for however the fuck you want, right? Like that's
the beauty, and I think that's the thing I always say, and I know it sounds glib when I say like, well, awards are nonsense, so it doesn't matter. But I think that's to me, that's what the point of reviews are and awards is. They're not gauging the quality of the thing being reviewed or awarded. They're an opportunity for expression on the part of the awarder or the critic. And they're starting conversations in this way. Like that's the thing that I find interesting.
The Game
I've been on
Awards
too
is just
many.
a celebration.
Oh, go on.
It's just a celebration, and it's a bunch of marketing that also takes the time to celebrate some games that came out this year. And it does. I don't think you need to take it as anything else, and that is perfectly okay.
But I think that's really cool. I think that's cool that that's a group of, especially with something like the Game Awards or the BAFTAs, which I'm more involved in. Like, it's the industry expressing its interest and expressing what it likes and what it's responding to, and that's a fun statement to perceive as an audience member. I'm interested in saying, okay, so what do American industry people think games should be? Oh, I can look at the Game Awards and I can kind of make assumptions and I can read into that. I've been on with the BAFTA juries. There's often a kind of, it's almost like being a political rally. You're trying to convince each other of an argument. You're kind of trying to express a view. And I've been in rooms where the best thing, in my opinion, has been far from like the top dog, but it was a really impassioned presentation from the person who was kind of fighting its corner. And that's interesting to me. And the audience will never have a sense of where that was or what that was.
Why I like juries,
but it flows through.
Yeah, juries.
Say again, sorry.
This is why I like juries better. Like an award that's chosen by a vote will almost always correlate to PR campaigns or that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But when it's a jury, especially like on DICE and things like that, where I remember once I was on DICE jury and I had seen like a behind the scenes vignette kind of deal on YouTube about a score that I found very interesting, and I linked to it in our group, and I said, I thought this actually added a really and the powers that be swept in and said, that we're not supposed to bring sort of external supplementary materials. It's really, you played the game. What did you glean from playing the game? Like, in order to put every game on an equal playing field, and everyone in the jury kind of holding themselves accountable to that as well. I find it is interesting how it does also swing the other way. I've also seen juries that are like, look, this one's going to get a lot of nominations because it's expected. So I think we should leave that slot.
I've thought that. I've been on the other side of that argument in the room on a few things because I'm like, well, if everyone's having that same conversation, then that's not really fair. Should you, as an award giver, care about what other awards have been given? That goes back to your Series 1 versus Series 2 of a TV show. Should you carry that awareness that Series 1 got awards into your critical appraisal of Series 2? There's no right answer to any of these questions, and that's what's interesting about them. I think we often, and you see this in the review scores conversation that happens every 6 months or so, like we so would love, people love objectivity, the idea of objectivity and the idea that there is a truth that you could find where there is a number, and that game is that number, and we can put that in the box and that information is quantified and established and we can all move on. And the fact that we can never truly quantify quality or creativity is what makes it exciting.
Yeah,
it really messes with people's heads, and there's got to be something in us as humans that we want that, but that we can never attain it, and that's kind of beautiful, I think.
Yeah, we're always chasing math for sure. Worth noting that the Game Awards is actually a very international jury. It's not American, but yeah, there is no discussion. I've been on the.
It's international, like baseball, though, right? Like it's predominantly American.
I think so, but it's probably the broadest of all of them.
That's probably true.
But yeah, I have voted on it, I think 4 times, and it is you just submit number. Like for IGN,
you don't have a conversation with your fellow judges.
You can't. There's too many of them.
Kind of lobby
people.
Yeah.
So the Game Awards always ends up being a popularity contest. It's always very predictable what's going to end up there. It's the stuff with the biggest marketing campaigns. I'm amazed that Balatro is on there. I think that that's awesome, but a lot of the audience hasn't even heard of it. So I'm glad that it actually got that recognition.
That got through with journalists, right? I remember a lot of game journalists just obsessing over that.
And it is a great game. And like this is one case that I can agree with for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree not to be nominated for Game of the Year is now a bunch of gamers know what Balatro is. That was a spot that potentially could have showcased another game, but that's also not the job of the jury. Like you're saying, it's not the job of the jury to think about what other juries are doing. It's also not the job of the jury to think about marketing. Their job is just, for whatever criteria you have, tell me what you think was the best game of the year. Best can mean whatever the hell you want it to mean, right? Like it doesn't have to mean anything. And when I did BAFTA, I found it so interesting. People were like,
record,
go ahead.
Just a little parenthetical insert on Balatro. I just looked up on SteamDB the kind of estimated ownership charts, and it's
don't trust that nonsense.
Well, even the very lowest one is 1.5 million units, and the others are.
I believe that. Yeah, I believe that.
I think Animal Well is. Like I was sort of surprised not to see Animal Well, but I guess I've seen more journalists talk about Balatro than.
I feel like that one was very much talked about for a week, right? And I think that's something we've definitely talked about with regards to our games as well, because we generally make kind of games that last X amount of hours and then you're done. We tend to get like a flash in the pan of interest, and then obviously by definition people move on. Whereas Balatro becomes, as you say, it's a Steam Deck, it's your airport game, so you're playing it for months and months and months of conversation. You know.
Also,
Animal Well is 300,000 estimates.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So a lot smaller than. Black Myth Wukong has the lowest Metacritic of almost any game that's ever been nominated for the Game Awards.
What is the Metacritic?
I thought that game was like massively beloved,
massively popular
by audiences, not so much by.
Oh no, critics like that too, because I mean they still nominated it, and it did get
but not like low 8s or high 7s, not 90s,
I think
right?
It's in the 8s. Let me have a look. It's an 81, and then the user score is an 83. The issue with
it's my Bithell game.
Black Myth Wukong. Have either of you played it?
I've not played it yet. No. When I'm prepared, when I'm courageous enough to open up that, because it's another sprawlingly gigantic game, as I understand it, and
it's not that big. So
really? Well, that has held me off because everyone seemed to love it, and I was excited.
No, it's not. It's not intimidatingly large. So the reason that I think it is in 100 next to Elden Ring, which is A, you came right after Shadow of the Erdtree. B is that I think I overhyped it in my head, and so I was overly excited for it. I thought this was going to be Game of the Year for sure, and then played it. It's a boss rush, and I think we were all expecting Sekiro. So it's very linear. Thanks, Austin.
Well, I don't
Everybody,
Austin.
Austin just sent a message saying it's hot out, top of the hour. Messages here on the
Yeah,
screen.
that's
You
really
can't
great.
see
But no, thank you.
it.
My effort to avoid interrupting your flow.
Yeah, that's
Appreciate
cool.
that you tried. It's basically like a series of long hallways with kind of egregious invisible walls and very good boss fights. The boss fights are really fun, but the in-between is not so hot. So it's not sprawling in the way that Elden Ring is sprawling. You don't have a lot of say over where you're going to go. There'll occasionally be like a couple of pathways, but the gameplay loop in between the boss fights is pretty repetitive. But it's still totally deserves to be there and is a good game. I think that I maybe overhyped it in my head, but that is majority of the reviews that list anything negative are with the format of it being a boss rush. And I would be surprised if it wins. I don't really know what's going to win this year. Astrobot could take it. Yeah, it could. If It Takes Two.
It's an industry of people who grew up with access to an older sibling's PlayStation 2. Like it's all through PS3 actually now. Like the nostalgia bomb plus the Nintendo-iness of it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be
yeah.
sure.
Not only is it nostalgia, it is also effectively a perfect video game. Like, you have both of those things. You know what I mean? And
that's what I mean. Yeah, because I think
easy.
I assumed it would be nostalgia because I'd seen that, but then yes, you do play it, and it's this is actually really,
incredible.
really
I mean,
competently,
the only
tidily done. Yeah.
argument that you could make for anything else, I think, again, this is just me assuming what the jury will vote for, not me telling you what is the correct pick, is that Shadow of the Erdtree, the press fucking love FromSoft. They really love FromSoft. So it's like that they could, if they nominated it again.
As do game developers, right? It's a massive one in terms of internal chats.
Yeah, everyone does. They're probably the favorite right now. They're next to Rockstar, who still get a bunch of scrutiny for online components, but everybody's pretty much obsessed with whatever FromSoft's doing. So, but Metaphor ReFantazio is also fantastic. Very good game. I think the only reason that it won't win Game of the Year when it could, and Persona 5 could have, and P3 Golden could have, is that it's Atlas. So it is, I think this one's only 70 hours, but in some cases 100+ hour, very JRPG. It's not niche, but of the games on here, it is a little harder to access. That's all.
Yeah.
Austin, you have to go.
Yep.
I got another meeting. Webcam quality is today.
Is it?
Yeah, it's.
I think there's something going on with my system because I think also my audio is completely fucked for this one.
Yeah,
yours is a little crunchy for me. Yeah.
I feel like I gotta reboot my system.
I had you playing through my speaker for the first 2 minutes of this show, so people will have had to
just curse.
Welcome back, Play Watch Listen.
Yeah, for real, we're really on it. Yeah, you record the Zoom though, right? So like, or you do a local OMS or whatever.
Record. And if I have to do that, I'll just apologize to everybody for the beeps earlier from my Logitech mouse disconnecting and reconnecting. I was like, it's fine, we'll have backup audio. Apparently not.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
You can just mute me for the first 2 minutes. No one.
Pro Tools is all manner of fucked up for some reason.
Got worse, Austin. You
anyway,
sound worse.
So strange.
You
both look and sound very crisp, and I don't get it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
yeah, no, yeah, you should. You should feel very proud. All right, see ya.
Bye. Now he's gone.
No, see. Thank God. Finally. How you doing?
I'm, okay. But I was gonna ask you what is your pick for Game of the Year? This is a thing that, again, traditionally, Play Watch Listen has been almost hilariously bad at. We never really have an answer. Everyone's like, I'm making them. I don't play them.
I think it's threes for the 5th year in a row. Honestly,
it's threes again.
I still love threes. I can't put it down. It's fantastic.
Have you ever played Outer Worlds?
No, it might be Astrobot. Say again.
Have you ever played Outer Wilds? I said Wilds.
Yes.
I mean Wilds. You have played it? Okay, good.
Yes, I did. I liked it. Liked it a lot.
Great game.
I think it's Astrobot for me as well. But to be fair, I've not played many games this year. Because I've been so busy. I've not really played enough stuff.
So I think I'm probably year, so I'm kind of on the same boat.
Yeah.
I did play the Silent Hill 2 remake, which I think is fantastic. I probably would have put it in my top 5. I think it's the scariest game I've ever played. Astrobot's up there for me, and Dragon's Dogma 2, which is one of those ones where it's like, I know it's not the correct pick, and there are issues with it that the audience had that are not wrong, but I love it. Has a soft.
That's cool.
Have you played Dragon's Dogma?
No.
The writing in those games is just
That's the
my
thing.
favorite.
I need to play more kind of writing first games. I tend to, as someone who probably my main talent is writing, and that's one of the things that largely people like the stuff we do for. Is I just don't play enough of the well-written games, and I'm kind of off to the side, kind of doing my own thing. I probably should engage more with what is being written in better written games, because when I sit down, I just want to play action games or like puzzle things.
It's tough when you're making games
I should.
because it consumes all of your being, and so sometimes you want the cheeseburger, as Austin said earlier,
Totally.
right? Like if you just want to sit down and play
Or
an action game.
watching movies and TV. I watch so much more
See
movies
that
and
too,
TV
is
now
like that a lot of
because I
movies have
get
good
after
writing.
yeah.
So yeah,
But it's
easier.
nice. It's nice. It's easy. You don't. Yeah, I don't like after a day's work. It's you just want to sit back and be entertained rather than doing the work. I think.
Yeah.
I think my other game of the year would be the incredibly convoluted download process for Black Ops 6.
Is it?
Which consumed 48 hours of my time.
I'm like, why? Rahul's downstairs playing it right now.
It's a good game.
It is a good game.
I only ever I play them for the single player mainly. I like the roller coaster. That's fun. It's good. The thing I had was I got back to the UK, massive jet lag, obviously. I was like, right, gonna play Call of Duty. That is the perfect jet lag game. I went to the store, bought a copy of Black Ops 6, got home, put it in my console.
You went to the
It
store
then
and you bought a
started.
copy of Black Ops 6. That's
I live in the olden
very
days,
millennial of
Alana.
you.
I like having a disc.
I do too.
I like having a
I get
disc.
it.
I don't know. But no, it just downloaded. It started downloading Modern Warfare 2. Like I put the disc in, it did its update, the classic PlayStation immediately starts downloading the mega updates file. But it started downloading the story campaign for Modern Warfare 2, and I didn't notice that that's what it was doing. But it downloaded the whole because all of COD now runs off this shared hub, right? They're not releasing multiple games, and this plays in interestingly into the Erdtree conversation. Technically, all Call of Duty games since Modern Warfare 2 have been DLC for Call of Duty as a concept.
Really?
So you have Call of Duty installed on your console, yeah, and everything is just an add-on pack essentially.
Call of Duty is, as a franchise, is just a live service game with seasons that are different flavors. I had no idea. That's really smart of them.
It's incredibly smart in a business sense.
Yeah.
If you're Mike and you played Modern Warfare 2 however many years ago, then uninstalled it from PlayStation and then you install Call of Duty takes up space, and I've deleted it off to make room for other games since, and you put in your Black Ops 6 disc, you're going to get the game will automatically try and download all of the previous COD games that you've bought before it will let you install, and you can't play the new Call of Duty until it's downloaded its own update. The story content for Black Ops is not on the disc, which is again pretty standard.
Yeah.
So you have to download that stuff. I'd not noticed that, so I had all of Modern Warfare 2 downloaded. Woke up I was like, this is taking too long. Went to bed. Woke up next morning. Modern Warfare 2 was on my console, but that's not the game I wanted to play.
Wow.
So I then had to unremove that, and it's just. I think they assume that everyone is basically keeping Call of Duty on their PlayStation all the time, which for the average Call of Duty player is probably exactly what's happening. Right?
To make you do that. The problem with keeping Call of Duty on your console is those games are so goddamn big.
Huge.
They're
so huge.
They're so big. That's like that's why people delete.
So that's my little rant. I don't like the modern world, Alana. I want to be able to go to the shop and buy myself a little CD-ROM, put it in my thing, and then a game. I can buy my little video game and I can have a nice time. Wow, that's what I want.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I genuinely had no idea.
Game of the year.
You know what? It is fun. I'm not a
Modern Warfare
person.
2. There you go.
Game of the year, Modern Warfare 2. Hey, why not? Oh, sorry. There was something that I wanted to say about the writing of Dragon's Dogma 2 real quick before we move on. Which is that it's not like it's well written in a plot sense. It's not, but it's the world has such a specific writing style.
Interesting.
Like everyone says well met and your name's Arisen, so they'll say well met Arisen. That is how everyone introduces themselves.
So you got like a sense of dialect and kind of
very
like
specific dialect and very fanciful.
Fascinating.
And then Dragon's Dogma has a pawn system, which is basically you can recruit NPCs that have like different AI, and they're called pawns. And so the pawns can have different personality types and will say stuff to you, and it's like full in universe why these AI will occasionally say the same things or behave the same ways, because they're like husks, like in-law husks of people. Like,
they're
not real
NPCs
people.
in the way that awful people on the internet use the word NPC.
Totally, they are literally NPCs. But it means that it's so fucking charming. The way everybody speaks in that game is just so fancy, and I just find it so fun, and I'm so sure that they know it's fun. Like, some of it's just ridiculous. I don't know, I just found it really creative. Like, I really fucking enjoyed that game, despite recognizing there were some issues with it. But I felt the same way about the first one. It's like, that's one of those ones that's solid 7 out of 10, but you love it, you know?
Well, I loved, I probably have ruined it for myself. I'm not going to say it on the show, but there's a big twist, right, in Dragon's Dogma in terms of where it goes and what you can do in the game. And I watched a video that kind of revealed that, and that just sold me on, like, that's a very cool thing to do for your audience, and something, and then show so much respect for the audience as well. Like, I love that stuff.
It's very cool, especially because it's like it's quite far in for that to happen, and it changes things so much. Yeah, I love those games. I think they're just absolutely fantastic. While also recognizing that, like, it's not like I feel like it got robbed for a Game of the Year nomination. I'm not surprised it wasn't nominated for Game of the Year. It came out with a bunch of controversy. I think because it was something to do with
customization, right?
I think so.
Oh,
the
was it
customization
that?
was actually very good, but it's Capcom have been following a very specific formula with how they do microtransactions recently. In that you can buy stuff that will make the game a little bit easier. And there are some things in Dragon's Dogma, the same that they were in the first game and the second game, that are like can be annoyingly difficult. Like, you can't fast travel very easily in Dragon's Dogma, and it makes it much easier if you buy them.
So the argument is they're making the game less fun, so that I pay, basically, is
which I
what
don't
people
actually think
are
is
worried
the case.
about.
I would understand why people would think that. Considering how difficult it or how annoying it is, but it was like that in the first game as well, and I think that's just part of the game design, is that it can be really punishing, and you can have to take these ox carts to travel instead of having to get your crystals. It's a whole thing, okay, but yeah, Capcom.
Sometimes you gotta get your crystals. Sometimes
you
you have
to, and you don't have to buy them. Despite what Capcom.
That's how we travel here in the UK. It's not fantasy. That is just how
and
it
ox
is here.
carts. I believe it. Speaking of good video games, Mike. You announced a game since the last time we spoke. Tell me about it.
I did. Well, thank you, Alana. I did. Tron Catalyst, which it's weird that that's out there now. Which is our 4 years, something like that. In terms of the start of the process of talking about maybe doing it, because basically, yeah, we did. So we came out with Tron Identity already, which is the visual novel. But this actually, we kind of started at the same time as Identity, or started the conversation actually a bit before. Like, we started talking to Disney about doing a world and doing different games within that world. So the whole way through Identity, and then talking about Identity, and then the year after Identity came out, like, basically couldn't acknowledge that wasn't the game. That was just an entry point into it. Yeah. So that was interesting. But yeah, it's cool. It's an action isometric game, focused on disc play and light cycles.
Very cool. I have a trailer up.
Thank you.
Right now. The combat looks awesome.
Yeah, it's gotten better since that trailer was done as well, which is always the way.
Yeah, true.
We put we've definitely, like, juiced that combat bit since the trailer came out. But yeah, that's game dev. You know this, like, you wince at every trailer like a month after it comes out, because you've already fixed all the issues that are in that trailer. You make the puddles smaller, you do all the key stuff. But yeah, no, it's cool. It's good combat. I think the story stuff, I think people are going to really enjoy as well. You can't obviously communicate that very well via a trailer, but I think I'm proud of the richness of that story in that world. It kind of goes back to a lot of what you're saying of, like, giving a sense of a voice to a place, and, like, what does, because that's the fun of writing for Tron, is that it is
that hard with Tron, because it's established and has been around for a very long time.
Well, there's room. So we one of the big things we did, and one of the kind of the center of our pitch to Disney was we want to make because obviously all of the world of Tron takes place inside computers. We want to make a new computer and call it something else. And it's there, and it's always been there. Honest, it's just going along itself. It's kind of had time to evolve. So this is like a society. It's kind of evolved in isolation. And I've had to give that pitch for like 3 or 4 years, and then I met the director of the original movie, and got chatting with him about it, and he was like, "Oh, it's like Galapagos grid," and I was like, "If I had that phrase 3 years ago, the amount of time I could have saved of like, oh, I see why you're the guy who created this enormous franchise. You're much cleverer than me." That's a very succinct way of putting it. So it's got this. So it's kind of been isolated. So it's got its own culture and its own history, which is nice. But then it's also with Tron. Part of the pleasure of Tron is that it's kind of goofy um
Campy a little?
It predates the terms it's using. So if you watch the original Tron, a lot of the terminology they're using for computers is kind of made up because we hadn't invented all of that stuff yet. Like the home computer was still this very new thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of there's stuff in there that is very cleverly kind of referencing computing, but also some of it is just using terms completely kind of off to the side. So that's kind of fun. The idea of like, what if computer terminology was like at the foundation of a language, and then it evolved over time in the same way as like there's so many words in English that like come from German or French or have flipped meaning, like, literally, right? Can you have fun with that, and can you play with that? So all of our characters talk in a way that, even without them knowing it, they're doing computer puns, but that's just kind of how their language has been formed.
So
and that's just fun.
Your like style guide look like for that? Like, how do you communicate the tone of a language? Like, I think Cyberpunk did a really interesting job of this. The tone of a language with the rest of the team to make sure that everyone's consistent on this is what this needs to sound like, because it sounds like it's a very important part of the DNA of the game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big parts of it is I do the last draft of everything, so that definitely kind of helps.
Are you writing
to get
everything, or just that
I'm writing an entire. No, I'm writing everything.
Okay, that's crazy.
Which is an absurd. I will tell you after we've recorded, just so I don't sound too David Cage about it. I'll tell you how many pages there are after we've recorded. It's absurd how much has been written for this.
Damn.
That's terrifying. But no, it's all this is one of the things I really like about working on IP is, I bet I don't know, maybe this might be true of God of War as well. Because essentially you have these layers, so you're not making something from whole cloth. You're doing, okay, in your case, here's the pantheon. This is the great Greek mythology on the whole, which is just a bunch of stuff we can research and reference and go and look to. Then we have the filter of like previous people who have made God of War games, who have obviously given specific meaning or chosen specific characters and given them these relationships, etc., etc., etc. And then there's what we've been doing since the God of War, the modern God of War franchise has kind of kicked in. It's similar here that I can basically go to kind of your centerpieces, which are the 2 movies. There's going to be a third one soon, but the 2 movies that existed when we started this, and I can look at how those are working and how those are written. And then I've also got access to essentially like their source files as well from when they made it. So I've got their original like Bible and materials that I can reference and kind of look at what their thinking was behind all those choices as well, which is phenomenally useful. And then, you just filter that through. Okay, well, we've got our own world. It's got its own history. We know these things have happened before the events of the game. We know that there's this kind of context, and you just kind of work it through from there.
That makes sense. Yeah, I have a friend who went from working on a very big, well-known IP to making a new IP, and I was like, how is it? And he said working on the big, well-known IP was like playing in a sandbox. It has structure and it has rules, and you understand, and you just kind of play with the pieces inside of the sandbox. And that working on a new IP was looking at a giant galaxy of infinite stars and having no fucking idea what to do. He was like,
that sounds about right.
Extremely daunting. That it's easier in a lot of cases to have some rules than to just be able to make up whatever.
Even if you're breaking them and you can kind of have fun, and I think that's part of what people like about IP as an audience as well, is kind of what are you going to do that matches what's gone before, and where are you going to deliberately kind of break the rules? You know, if you look at like, I don't know, like the popular discourse around like Marvel movies, they'll be anticipating like, oh, they're going to do this niche character that was in 3 comics back in the 90s. I wonder what their take will be. Will it be completely consistent with what's this? Or, oh, you can't do that character anymore because this character was established. I remember with, oh, that's a spoiler for Agatha All Along, but a character in Agatha All Along where the backstory of that character just does not work in the MCU because they did the blah, 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 blah. And the audience was intrigued by that. And I think that's part of what the audience likes about these things and what's fun. And I like that. I like having
you can get the
a
hardcore
North
fans
Star
in
to steer away from as well.
Yeah.
Like, so like one of the things we've done is, because our world's been living for so long, we have a faction in our world who are called Automata, who are atheists. They don't believe that the users exist. It's been so long, no one's seen a user. No one alive has ever seen a user. You think we're inside some kind of computer? That's ridiculous. And what can you do with that? And how can you play with that? And that's a fun little bit of sci-fi storytelling. And, you know, you can write so much story just based off of that premise, right? But it only exists because of a central ironic truth about the universe that's been established and exists, right? That there is definitely users, and we as an audience know there are users. So you're bouncing off of the canon in that way as well. So it's just, that's the stuff I enjoy. I love that aspect of adaptation. That's really fun.
Yeah, where
and you've always got
with expectation.
Yeah,
very cool.
You've got something to react to. It's like your friend said, it's not a blank page. You've got and the audience wants you to, you know, they want you to be true to the franchise, but they also do want you to kind of play at the edges of it a little bit and see where you can push it. As with the filmmakers and the generations of people who've worked on any major franchise as well, you know.
Yeah, very cool.
You're getting to talk to them and work that through. Yeah, it's fun.
That must have been awesome. Like getting to work with a bunch of people who've worked on Tron. Again, it's like such a pivotal sci-fi franchise. That must have been a very cool experience.
It's crazy.
Because you've been a big fan for a long time, right? You have been a big Tron fan.
Oh yeah, I wore out my local rental shop's copy of it when I was a kid. Like, I was obsessed with that movie. I loved it.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So it's really cool. It's yeah, and I think just it's the conversations as well and that kind of wisdom, because you can read a bunch of like interviews with people. You can kind of have those chats. It was the same with John Wick. Like, just being able to sit down with Chad and just the director of John Wick movies and going through like, okay, so tell me about this and why did you do that and what was the thinking behind that? And those answers are always going to be so much more interesting if given like in a private setting where you're not worrying about PR people, because it's like, oh, we did that because we didn't have enough money to do the other thing. It's like, okay, cool. So that's interesting. Okay. And you can have those kind of conversations with all of the talent behind these things. And yeah, they've been really cool. The getting to check in and talk to people, and like from all generations. So like the people from the original movie through to like what they've done with what they did with Legacy and what they're doing with the new film as well. So cool. Been able to. It's been fun. It's been fun.
When can people get it? And should they wishlist it on Steam? Do you reckon?
I don't think they should. No, I don't think they should wishlist it.
No.
I dare them to wishlist it.
They won't do it. They're a bunch of cowards.
They wouldn't dare. They're a bunch of cowards. They wouldn't do that.
Well, you think you can wishlist Tron Catalyst on Steam? And I'll leave a link in the description.
Them. This audience, I don't even want you there.
Absolutely
not.
I'm
actively against you wishlisting it. You should wishlist it on like Steam, console, blah blah blah. And it's out next year. We've not been more specific than that yet.
Very exciting.
And then the third movie is out October next year. And there's some cool stuff going on with that as well. I'm very into that. I'm very excited about that.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? On the Steam page for me, it says, is this game relevant to you? Similar games you played. Warhammer 40k Darktide. Do you know what that game's basically Left 4 Dead. I don't know.
I'm not familiar with that specific, because there are a billion Warhammer games.
Yeah, Warhammer 40k Darktide is a Left 4 Dead-esque. I don't know about that one, Steam. I'm not convinced Tron Catalyst is going to be like Warhammer 40k Darktide. But
I'm kind of intrigued to see. I'm trying to intrigued to see what the.
It's a first-person shooter-ish.
No, I mean what my recommendations. If I go to Tron
yours
Catalyst
relevant
on
to
Steam,
you
what
is?
does it say it's related to? I'm not even making this up. God of War Ragnarok. So there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Huh?
There's nothing you can say that would be massively offensive to me, Alana. It's fine.
Well, maybe
I think it's the production value. I think it's the
maybe
quality of the writing.
somebody made a Play Watch Listen Steam group.
Did they?
No, I'm just
Maybe.
making it up.
Oh,
That
saying
maybe
maybe.
they're similar in that it's these chuckle fucks who worked on them.
I
did
also have Dark Tide on there, so I don't know what that is. Don't know. Weird.
Have you played Dark Tide? You just said no, didn't you?
No.
But it's also recommended there?
It's also recommending Dark
An
Tide.
interesting choice. An interesting choice.
Mm.
But yeah, the game looks rad. Mike, very excited to play
Thank
it.
you.
Love that the art style is Tron, but is also making me think a little bit of Solitaire Conspiracy and some of the style that
It's
you've
our
got.
glow.
It's still very...
It's our glow.
It's Bethelian,
It's glowy.
if you will.
Bethelian.
Yes.
Bethel-esque. Yeah.
I prefer Bethelian.
No, I'm really happy with it. It's coming together. It's a lot of fun.
Looks
I was
rad.
just in LA kind of walking it through with everyone over at Disney, and it's fun. It's coming together. I really like it.
Look forward to it.
Yay.
Alrighty, well, that's it for this week's Play Watch Listen, everybody. Thank you for hanging out. Sorry we've been gone. We will be back on the 6th of December, I think. Yeah, that's right. 2 weeks from now. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm a video director. Don't you dare wishlist Tron Catalyst on Steam.
We don't want you there.
We don't even want
Fuck
you there.
you.